I'm glad you mentioned ruck, Tom, because it's another area of the game that I really want to look at. Because I know on BTP, and we'll have a look at these clips in a second, you guys talked about the effectiveness of some of the skill set, the trade in the breakdown by the Lions. Last night, Jack Morgan playing for the Lions against the First Nations Pacifica side, probably flirted with the line of illegal, legal. Here he sort of rolls into the way of the play. First Nations side, they score 2 phases later. And there's another moment here where the First Nations team get penalised for illegal entry, which they do. But you could also argue that Jack Morgan never releases Luke Hahn here. Now, again, I'm not saying the referee got that wrong and First Nations are hard done by. I'm pointing to the craft of back rows in particular really flirting with that line of illegal or legal, and we've seen Tom Curry do it, which you talked about in BTP Hoops. From a back rower's point of view, how did teams try and limit your impact there, which part of your role as an open side flanker was seeing how far you could push the line of legal or illegal?
Yeah, I think it's, well, it starts pre-game, so it starts with talking to the ref about, you know, this is what an opposition 7, this is what they're doing. These are some of the trends we're seeing a Lions. So, you know, Joe and his team have access to the referee before the match and should be saying, look at how they're implicating our fast ball. So that's where, you know, at this level it starts. And then when you get into the game, that communication needs to carry. So you see the referee before the match, this is what we think they'll do. Now, this doesn't mean the referee's going to blow it your way, but this is how you can start to preface it in the referee's mind or, you know, the governing body's mind that this is a tactic. Now, it's a brilliant tactic because it's implicating, and the Wallabies are trying to do it. Like, I'm not sitting, like, we're sitting here saying both teams, if they've got their wits about them, are trying to do it. You try and do everything you can to slow it up legally. If you can't get the turnover, well, can you get a 5-second ruck? If you can get a 5-second ruck, then how quickly can you get off the line? Because you're going to get the ball back. It all adds up in the end. So, you know, there is ways to try and manage it, but the ref has the whistle at the end of the day, so push the boundaries as much as you can. Like, Richie McCaw was the best at it.
Yeah.
So, you know, and look how successful they were. So it's a very important part of the game.
So if the ref wasn't picking up you pushing that boundary, how did teams stop you being effective in that area?
Well, I didn't put my head in the breakdown that much, mate. So you'll have to ask, you know, Poey or, you know, a George Smith or something like that. The Kiwis are very good at the, you know, craft in and around rucks. So how you break off a scrum, you know, they're thinking about how your running lines to the first breakdown. They preview on how I would run a running line to a first breakdown and maybe try and manipulate you on the way there before even you get to the breakdown. So there's games within the games, particularly at a really high level, on how you can manipulate the situation before you get there.
I couldn't be more impressed with the Kiwis in the way that for a long time they've always just, not illegal, but they've always pushed those dark arts.
But it's only illegal if you get caught.
Yes, true. But, you know, I really respect how they're quite game-changing in the way they do things, how they operate and how they're able to skirt the referee's rules. It's funny, every year World Rugby puts out the big 10-minute clip of the new rules and what they can do, can't do, using clips from games. And I remember sitting next to Ash Dixon last year watching him, and I was like, 8 All Black clips in a row, and I was like, it's always you blokes, isn't it? But just because they're quite ahead of the game, and don't, like Tom Curry and Jack Morgan, they're some of the best 7s in the world. Yep. They know how to flirt that line.
What about, I was going to say as a 9, Nick, what did they try and do to you to get you off your game based on ruck?
It's the way to combat it, like Hoops would know, is if you're there early and you're secured, they don't really usually have an entry. For a 9, it's gone a long way away from like milking the penalty now to just trying to get on with it no matter what. A lot of the time there will be bodies in the way, lying on the ball, and you just got to get around them. And the ref also, he's not that sympathetic to 9s. He wants the game to flow as well. He doesn't really want to blow a penalty there. He wants to see another phase. Players getting in the passing line, they're happy to do that. Some referees will pay the penalty if you pass into them, and some referees will just make you look like an idiot.
On that note, I want to look again at the Tom Curry clips that Hoops and Shawnee and Matt Burke looked at on BTP this week, because from the point of view of the 9, Jake Gordon gets interrupted here, Nick, and in the other clip he gets interrupted as well. Do you have to talk to the ref at some point? Do you just have to bite the bullet and get on with it? You
got to get on with it because he's not going to be too sympathetic, the ref. But that's a refereeing decision. That's a penalty. So
right there is a moment where we were discussing this before on air. potentially Jake could pass the ball into Tom Curry and hope that it ends up in a penalty.
Yes, yeah, and like that's also should have been picked up by the referee, and he would know that as well, looking back on that. But that's the sort of things that needs to be policed early and penalised early, so that then the scene's set through the rest of the game.
Yeah, look, I think I would have loved to have seen Jake pass it into him. I think Griggs was one of the best. I remember him doing that all the time way back in the day when I was a youngster. So seeing that and then asking the referee, well, if that's not a penalty, what is? So then it's on his radar. And Nick's come to me plenty of times in the game and says, mate, they are not rolling away. You've got to get them to roll away. And that's a conversation between the captain and the referee as an ongoing game management thing. So, you know, when we talk about refs, I think we've got to really be careful of how much we criticise, because if they blow the P out of the whistle, then we're going to be complaining how much they blow it out. Now, Ben O'Keefe managed the breakdown, maybe over-managed that game, and maybe an alternative to that would have been, well, he sets a standard early. This is what I'm willing to accept and not willing to accept as the game got into 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then the players, they're all great players. They know where they're trying to push the boundaries, start to back off a bit. And then the game becomes much more free-flowing. And I think we actually saw that a bit with the First Nations Pacifica game last night. It turned up being quite a flowy game towards the back end, when at the start it was looking like it could be pretty treacherous.
It's the same refereeing, I guess, tripod that are going to be in the middle and on the touchlines for these three tests. They just rotate through, obviously. How would you approach the referees as a captain, going into test number 2 this week and test number 3, and putting some of those things on their radar? Do you get a chance to talk to the referee before the game about some things you'd like to be, I don't know, for them to keep an eye on?
Well, now you're opening up a can of worms. We don't have long enough to talk about that. I actually don't think you should be allowed to.
Okay.
So you are, and unless it's changed, and Tom, you might know this, but you can meet with the referee day before the game. So Captain's Run Day, you can meet with the referee. You can sit down and have a coffee and a meeting and talk about strategy, talk about, you know, things that you've seen of the opposition. Just you want to keep the eye out for. It's a bit of an art. And again, our friends across the ditch do this very well in just sort of prefacing, you know, some of the things that might be coming up in the game. Now, I actually don't think it should be allowed, because we're human and
Prejudice creeps in.
Prejudice might creep in. So I see a 50-50 scrum. I'm going to give it to the team that I like more. Don't you? That's why you don't have we have had it in the past, and we won't mention it, but when you don't usually have a referee from that state or that country refereeing that game, because how could I not give a 50-50 to Australia if I was refereeing them?
It's interesting you say that. Bizarrely, on the Windies tour, John Blom, who's Australia's best tennis umpire, who does Wimbledon, all the tournaments, was chatting to him, and he said that, like, I wouldn't be seen to be out having dinner with a player for fraternising with players for obvious reasons, keeping that boundary. Now, rugby seems to be a little bit more in the tent, meetings and all the rest to try and woo them, but it's not every sport does it like that.
I love that you found a way to bring up the West Indies tour that you've just returned from. Tom, I've got to say, incredible insight to have the two of you and talk about some of the real nitty-gritty around how you manage referees, how you try and manage teams who are pushing the boundary of things. Like that's what people, I think, tune into Inside Line for.